pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Yeah, that's against the law where I come from, too.
Where do you come from?
Heaven?
What'd you say just a minute ago? Why'd you want to save me?
Is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter. I'm leaving right now. I'm going to school. This is my last chance.
But they'll vote with Potter otherwise.
You can't laugh off this Bailey Park anymore.
Bailey family's been a boil on my neck long enough.
You realize what this means? It means bankruptcy and scandal and prison. That's what it means.
I'm worth more dead than alive.
Why don't you go to the riffraff you love so much and ask them?
I suppose it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
All right, you've got your wish. You've never been bored. You've been given a great gift, George. A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
I want to live again. Please, God, let me live again.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again, and Merry Christmas. I am your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. And as always, joining me across the country is my ever-present co-host, the film critic and historian for TalkMoviesMe.com, Mr. Doug Heller, AS2. How are you today?
I'm kicking the dust of this crummy town off of my shoes, and I'm going to see the world, Mary.
I suddenly came out of Richard Nixon there.
That's more like this.
Aru. We're talking today about It's a Wonderful Life, and this is my Christmas pick. I'm picking the first one. Doug will pick the one next week, and so I didn't really want to get into this one because it's so familiar. I wanted to pick something obscure, but eventually I watched the movie the other night and I just caved because it's a great movie.
It is.
I saw this as a teenager, and to tell you how long it's been since I've been a teenager, I watched it on TBS, and I had a choice. I could either tune in at 7 and watch it in color, or I could tune in at 9 and watch it in black and white. I tuned in at 9. This was during the colorization phase, you know, the whole Ted Turner thing. This is the only movie I've ever actually seen in color.
Yes.
I actually did watch it later just to see what colorization looked like. It was horrible.
Oh yeah.
It's like
yeah.
somebody painted it with a spray can. Or something.
We had it taped off a TV, and I hadn't seen it, and I went to go watch it when I was a teenager, and it was colorized, and I took it out of the VCR. I just couldn't watch it. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, the colors, the skin tones were pink.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that I'm glad that Ted Turner's colorization died before it really got started.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a crime against nature. It was like what they always missed in those colorizations was that the movies were not black and white because they were broken. They were black and white because it was an artistic choice. And
or because color film was too expensive to shoot on. Right.
Well, and also it's an artistic choice. When they selected the colors of the costumes and the sets, they were selected because of the way they were photographed in black and white.
Right.
Which is why they look so bizarre when they're colorized.
Right.
I've actually seen a color photo of the set from the Addams Family.
Oh, really?
It looks bizarre because everything is selected. The colors don't look natural
Right.
because they were selected by the way they come out in black and white. So, yeah, that was an era that died before it really began. But fortunately, I saw this film for the first time in black and white. I still love it.
Mm-hmm.
When did you first see this one?
Probably also as a teenager in high school. Um, just because I'd known about it, and you'd seen clips of it. I'd probably seen all of it at some like in pieces throughout my life, but sat down to finally watch it uh, when I was a teenager, when I was getting into movies and everything. I think it was on the AFI Top 100 list, which I used as kind of a primer to go off from and learn more out of that. So I think that's when I first saw it.
That's
And
a great list because it got a lot of people interested in movies.
yeah. I mean, it's a crappy list if you already know movies, but it's great if you don't.
Yeah, if you know movies, it's kind of perfunctory. It's like
Yeah.
these are the films you have to select. But It's a Wonderful Life is a movie that the best thing that ever happened to it was that it went out of copyright.
Right.
Because there was a clerical error sometime. And this movie came out in 1946. It did not do well.
Mm-mm.
It killed its production company before it even got started. Liberty Films, which was founded by George Stevens and William Wyler and Frank Capra.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to, they founded a studio to make movies with a social conscience. Well, they made two films before it was sold to Paramount. They made this and State of the Union. And it just completely folded. But It's a Wonderful Life kind of languished until the 1970s when it began showing up on every single station that could show it because it was out of copyright.
Right, because in the 60s, I think Capra was doing interviews, and they would say, "What is your favorite film that you made?" And he would always say, "It's a Wonderful Life," uh, and people would look at him like, "Is that a movie? Did you do that? Is that something that exists?" Like,
I get that. I hear that all the time. Is that a movie? Yeah,
yeah,
it is. Yeah, but it until 1998 when NBC kind of spoiled the party. This thing would show up around just before Thanksgiving,
mm-hmm.
and it would run. It was like I Love Lucy. You turn the TV on.
Right.
There was never a time when you couldn't turn the TV on and see it somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Usually on two, 3 channels at the same time.
You could flip around and off of the commercials and get to the part where you would have been picking up on some other channel, and then
And
flip
never
from
watch a
that.
commercial.
Right.
It was fun. It was fun, and it got people interested in the movie, and it made it a movie classic. Unfortunately, NBC bought it in 1998. We haven't had that since.
Right. They just show it on Thanksgiving, and that's about it.
That's about it. Yeah. But people like me, I still love it.
Oh yeah.
And I watch it. It's one of those miracle movies. You watch it, and you're like, how in the world did this ever come together? Because the story elements, getting into the movie itself, the story elements are kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
The movie is told 95% of this movie is told in flashback,
Right.
which is a very tricky structure because it can work or it cannot work.
Mm-hmm.
But the framework, and this is a religious movie without being a religious movie.
Right. Yes.
It's just basically about how a good man has a lot, gives his all to everybody at the expense of his own dreams, and he doesn't, and he's frustrated by it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment of despair, is about to kill himself. And but it's fascinating because Capra spends the entire movie leading you from the moment of his childhood all the way up to the present day.
Right.
And you meet everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how he had a hand in the course of destiny. And how he was always
How he
frustrated.
impacted.
Yeah, how impacted, and how he was always frustrated by his own by the turnabout in his own ambition.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to go out and do things in the world, but he kept stuck in this little town.
And he couldn't see the impact that he'd had on the world writ large because he was just stuck there at this little building and loan that was always struggling for money. But you find out that if he hadn't lived, or if he had kicked out of town early, uh, his brother could have died, and then all those people on this military transport would have died because his brother wouldn't have been there to save him during the war.
Well, and not only that, but it's
The whole
interesting
town.
Yeah. If you look at the, because he's always battling this greedy, basically Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah.
He's basically Mr. Potter. He's always dealing with this man who is at the edge of buying up this town and basically turning it into nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that building alone is the artery of the prosperity of this town.
Right.
And Potter's always trying to kill it. And it's interesting because there's that. If it's not Mr. Potter, it's his relationship with Mary.
Mm-hmm.
It's not his relationship with Mary, it's the Great Depression. If it's not the Great Depression, it's the war. It's always something
Right.
that keeps his feet planted on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Jimmy Stewart's best performance ever.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I love Vertigo. I love Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but this is it. Because this is a multi-layered performance. I mean, it's
Right.
really, really good.
Although
And,
it should be noted that he only ever won one competing Oscar, and it was for the Philadelphia Story, the only movie that he actually talks fast in.
Yeah. Because the rest of the time, he,
well, of course, that's why he was perfect. His last role was perfect for him. The droopy dog sheriff in Fievel Goes West.
Yeah. But I'm always interested in this movie could have been a disaster. Because while it's a flashback, it's also very episodic.
Yes.
There are incidences. He has contact basically with everybody
Mm-hmm.
in town, all the major players. And he asks everybody, and he asks nothing of anyone.
Right.
But he's always, there are these little things. And he, the best story, in my mind, is this little story within a story that he has with this man that he works for.
Mm-hmm.
When he's a child, Mr. Gower, who loses his, back in 1918?
Yeah.
Loses his son in the great influenza epidemic. And he makes a mistake that could have killed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And George circumvents that. And it's a great little story inside of the bigger story.
Right.
Now, if you're cutting this script, if you're getting rid of, if you're trimming the fat in the script, that can go without any real, without damaging the script. But having it in there gives it color.
Right.
Gives it a lot of color. As does.
And it pays off later in the movie too.
Yeah, it pays off beautifully later on. And so is this little side plot about the town flirt.
Oh yeah.
Violet.
Mm-hmm.
Who she runs around with a variety of different men. And George is trying to help her move away, because she's got a reputation here.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to help her move to New York so she can get, start a new life. And it's not necessary, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a wonderful, full script.
It's a deceptively simple movie, because it leads you down this really kind of straightforward path, but it isn't straightforward at all. There's so much else going on in every scene. The more you watch it, the more you realize how much one scene sets up something at the end, or how something that's said in one scene early is directly related to something that you see later. It's all multifaceted, and not just Stewart's performance, but I think Donna Reed's performance, and Thomas Mitchell, and Lionel Barrymore. This is possibly this is his best role too, maybe, because it's the only time that he's ever a bad guy.
Yeah.
But he plays one so well. He's usually this really genial kind of person, especially if you go back even to other Capra pictures. You Can't Take It With You, or even going into harder stuff that he did a little later, like Key Largo. He's still a nice, good guy. This is the only time he plays anybody that is not the kind of hero. The closest he ever got was on Dr. Kildare, when he played the curmudgeon old doctor, but he was still a good guy.
There's no subtlety to this character.
No.
At all. None.
Nope.
He's an evil man.
There's a skull with a chain on it on his
skull
desk.
on his desk. There's no subtlety to this. He's in a wheelchair with a back that looks like a headstone.
Yeah.
I mean, again, black and white. His face looks like a skull when he's just talking down to George. It's just, he's the villain with a capital V.
Yes. He's very, very close to twirling his mustache and tying a woman to the train tracks. Like,
yeah. And I'm telling you, that characterization, I think, got this movie in trouble.
Yeah.
When the government started looking into Hollywood pictures for subversive messages, because they were rooting out communists.
Ah, HUAC.
There is they found a very socialist agenda to this film, in that it does sort of that it deifies the common man.
It does, and it vilifies capitalism.
Right.
Because the nightmare version of this town is a bunch of basically prosperous businesses that are owned or leased by Mr. Potter, who is making all this money off of the sin and vice of the people in the town. He turns it into a rum-running whore town.
Can we talk about this for a second? Because the town that he's running, the Pottersville, this town is like the most racist thing.
Oh,
there's
God,
like
yeah.
The Indian place. There's like the bamboo room.
There's all sorts of terrible racial characterizations for money. There's dime a dance places, which let's be honest, yeah, they were fronts for prostitution houses, prostitution rings, and bar after bar after bar after bar after bar. It's like, get drunk, then go pay a dime for a dance, and then go out and have a drink. And
here's what's funny: Mary's working in the library. You would imagine that in a town with...
How is that even still open?
In a town with bars and cat houses, the library's not going to do a whole lot of business. The most she's going to do all day is probably throw drunks out.
Yeah, or check out books on home remedies for sexually transmitted diseases. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, the message of the movie essentially is one man can make a difference, and
right.
it's a good message. When I was watching it last night, I kept thinking to myself, I do not want to be critical of this movie at all, because it is a terrific movie, and it's a great American institution.
Absolutely.
But I cannot overlook the fact that when he finally sees the nightmare version of this town, it's a little presumptuous. It basically points to the idea that these people cannot stand on their own.
Right.
Because Mary not only... Mary doesn't marry anybody.
Right.
Anybody else.
Right.
And you would think a woman this beautiful, she is beautiful.
Donna Reed was
could find a
gorgeous,
man.
Yeah.
She had an offer. Sam Wainwright.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what it's trying to say is that George was the only one for her, putting forward the kind of nonsense as there's the one and there's only one for you, and if they're never born, you're gonna live a life of loneliness, which doesn't make any sense at all. But it was the 40s. What do you want?
Yeah. But like I said, the building alone is basically the artery of this.
Yeah.
Town. And without it, it dies.
Yeah, and I wanted
but
to talk about...
But I do think it's a little overly gloomy about the human resilience. You know, and I know money, power, but still...
I don't think that it's too... I don't think it's too far off base, honestly, but I think you have a little bit more faith in humanity than I do.
It's a little like 1984, and I'm watching when I read that book, I thought, well, you're kind of missing the idea of human resilience. You know, the resistance to this kind of tyranny and that kind of thing. I think they were a little overly dramatic about it. But again, it was the 1940s. You know,
we could debate whether elements of 1984 have ever come true, but that's not for this episode.
Yeah, that's another. But
I want to talk about the noir aspects of this movie.
Oh yeah.
Because it's stunning. It's the darkest Christmas movie ever that's actually a Christmas movie, not just set at Christmas like Die Hard or Batman Returns or yeah, it's not Krampus, but it's really dark, and that end part that really is only about 15 or 20 minutes at the end of this movie is really one of the single most cynical things you could ever see in a movie from this time frame, and that's including things like Kiss Me Deadly, and like that basically just ends with a huge nuclear explosion and the world ending. Which is another one we'll have to talk about sometime. Like it's just so bleak and dark, and it's all told in flashback with little jumps forward to the two galaxies and the star, which represent, I guess, what Michael the Archangel and
Franklin and Joseph
and Clarence. And then it goes back into this flashback, like we're watching the movie of George's life, which is what I've always loved about this. If you're gonna do some kind of narration or some kind of flashing back or whatever, noir tended to do this best. Noir and Citizen Kane. When you have different perspectives, you know there's somebody being interviewed or there's a story being told, and you see that story being told. That way you can go back and then you can move forward and you can jump around because it's not just, well, let me tell you this story, and it starts at the beginning and it goes to the end, and it's like,
Right.
who are you talking to? Like it starts off and there you don't see the person as like they're talking to you. It's like, why are they talking to you?
Yeah.
Who are they aware that they're in a movie, and if they are, how is that possible, and where does that put us? Like, but
Yeah, I never could stand those movies that give you exposition for the audience.
yeah,
You know, like they'll
in
come in and say, "Oh
especially
well, Bill, my old friend, we went to college together." You know.
right, or it starts off. You're looking at the main character and they start to do voiceover, but they're not talking in the frame. It's like,
Yeah.
well, who are you talking to? Are you talking to us? Is this? Are you going to flash back and tell us the story of how you got to be on this bench?
Yeah.
Because how would you know that we're here? And if
Yeah.
so, are we watching this as it unfolds? Like, it's so confusing. Voiceover can be really, really aggravating. But
Or I love it when two characters are just talking and it's like they're talking about the third person who's about to come in the door, and they start telling each
Mhm.
other about how they connected with that person. When these two people would be like, "Why are you telling me this?"
Right, they already know. They already know. And it's like, this doesn't do that though. This sets everything up really organically in a way that's actually kind of uncommon for movies of that time. Um, Especially flashbacks.
Yeah.
They were still kind of getting the feel for um, non-chronological storytelling,
Yeah.
even though Orson Welles gave them the blueprint in 1941. Uh, they were still struggling with it by 1947. There was a few good ones like, Out of the Past and a couple of others that really kind of embraced non-chronological order, but you knew who
Right.
they were talking to. The Killers was another one that, but you knew what was going on because you knew somebody was looking for someone and they were asking someone and they said, "Well, here's what I saw."
Yeah.
Instead of those biopics where they would have like the guy, like say Yankee Doodle Dandy. I adore Yankee Doodle Dandy, but it starts off with Cohan talking to President Roosevelt, and it just goes all the way back to his childhood with his family and everything. It goes all the way up to when he got called to sit down with him in the first place. It's like, why are you telling him this? What is going on here? I get why we get to see it, but why?
Why are you saying this to each other? There's this movie does a brilliant thing right off the top. Is that when you get those scenes in heaven, and Joseph is talking to Clarence, the stars are blinking,
Hmm.
and you get that Joseph is talking to Clarence, and he says something about, "I've only got an hour to prepare," and Joseph says,
Hmm.
"No, you're going to spend that time getting to know George Bailey."
Right, and it fills more than an
Right.
hour.
More than an hour. But I mean, it's basically he's telling you you're about to spend the next
Hmm.
hour or two dealing with George,
Right.
you know, and no, seeing what's you know going through the episodes of his life that lead up to what happens at the end.
Hmm. It's expertly put together, and it's funny how a movie can be nominated for Best Picture, like this was, and still nobody knew anything. Like nobody'd seen it, and having that
People
nomination
didn't want it
didn't.
because it was too dark,
It was really dark.
and this was a year after the end of America's involvement in World War II,
Right. This
and
is yeah, 47, so it's just after we
46.
drop 46, yeah. So it's just after we drop the bombs, and
It was people just
it
weren't
was a
ready for
tough
this.
sell. Yeah.
They just weren't ready for this. Now that they were ready for the best years of our lives, which did win
Hmm.
the Oscar.
Yes.
Which I always say It came out in 46. Had it come out in 45, it would have been too soon. Had it come out in 47, it would have been too late.
Yeah, it was perfectly right. Perfect.
But
it's a great movie.
Life at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
It's
was.
a Wonderful Life would have been more suited to be released sometime in the late 50s.
Yeah.
I think more in the noir.
Or maybe even in the late 40s, early 50s. Give people some time to cool off from the war.
But I'm always thinking, once you get to the end of this movie, that's really where Jimmy Stewart's performance kicks in.
Oh yeah.
Most of the movie is him doing the charming, everyman, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there are darker edges to it.
Yeah.
And it really comes to flower at the end when he's about to kill himself, and he goes into the nightmare world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we remember.
Yeah.
In the nightmare world, it's very bizarre. It's an interesting contrast. The nightmare world is overseen by this extremely obnoxiously sweet soul in Clarence.
Yes.
Clarence is just so naive. What is it? They go to Nick's bar and like, what is it?
He wants
mulled wine.
Mulled wine because he hasn't had a drink in 200 years, and that's what they were drinking then. It's
heavy on the cinnamon, light on the clove.
Right.
And Sheldon Leonard, I love Sheldon Leonard's performance. But look, mister, we serve hard drinks in here for men who want to get drunk fast, and we don't need any characters in here to get the joint acted to. Is that clear? I have no doubt that Sheldon Leonard was really like that. He's just such a caricature, though.
Yeah. And there's
just the nightmare world. The nightmare world is everybody's in trouble and everybody's a jerk.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Without George Bailey, everybody is an asshole.
Yeah. What I love about it is the fact that the suggestion that basically George Bailey made Nick a nice guy.
Right.
You know, without him, he would be a complete jerk.
Giving him a house, I guess, or something.
I guess.
Letting his family settle down and not rent from Potter and get out of Poverty Row. That because that's all. I mean, Potter was a slumlord, basically, who when George's father would have died, and Uncle Billy takes over the savings and loan, or the building and loan, because George isn't there to do it. It falls apart, and Potter takes over the whole town, and
he ended up going into a mental institution. Yeah. Goes crazy.
Wouldn't you?
It's not like you can go into any other business. I mean,
right.
But it's funny that all of this. It's just interesting that he and the building and loan were the only thing in the town that was really keeping them from falling into under the foot of Mr. Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just always interesting to me how many people, and of course again how many people he touched. And you get that scene at the end that it never fails to put a lump in my throat. They all want to help because Mr. Potter has overestimated the people.
Right.
Or underestimated the people.
Underestimated them and just...
Because he tells them, what would they do if they found out that you lost money?
Right.
They'd run you out of town on a rail. Well, that's not even a little bit true.
No.
Because she makes one phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Mary makes one phone call, and the whole town turns out to give him money. And they don't even think.
Right.
They don't even think about it.
And it turns out being more than what they needed.
Yeah.
And it's like enough to keep the building and loan going. I mean...
That little table.
Oh.
Really fast with the money in. Yeah, not only that, I mean, my God, it's like... I can't imagine what I guess he's going to put it in the building and loan. I have no idea, but it's like there's these piles and piles and piles of money.
It's like
And
it's like what was it, Paulie at the Corleone wedding. It's like in
yeah,
that little purse, just envelopes of $7,000 a pop. Maron.
this was somebody else's wedding.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they
But
come out in
and the
droves, and
funny
it's
thing is,
everyone in town. It's just,
you know what? I just thought of this. You know, when the brother comes in,
hmm
because the brother was rescued by George when he was a kid.
hmm
Which I got to talk about that in a second. And he comes in, he says, "The richest man in town." I'm thinking, well, yeah, look at the table.
yeah.
He's got thousands and thousands of dollars. He is the richest man in town.
Yeah, he is.
But of course, the larger thing is, look around you.
Because he has friends and support and friends who love him and family that loves him and all kinds of things. And you know what always struck me? I mean, it's one more level of George Bailey is that because he's in charge of the savings and loan, he feels like it's his fault that his uncle lost the money.
Did
His
he ever
uncle
prove him?
lost the money, and he's
Yeah.
convinced that he's going to jail. All he would really need to do if he were a businessman of this time, or even more like Potter, would be like, look, Mr. Bank Examiner, my uncle either lost or stole the $8,000. Let's bring him up on charges, and then that would be it. Like, that would be it. And obviously, I think this was before FDIC, but
Yeah.
um,
That's why the bank examiner's coming around. I mean,
right.
you know,
And so, but he decides, if this gets discovered, he's the one that's going to take the fall. He's not going to.
everyone's going to take the fall.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
What I thought is, it's that thing. It's that very my grandparents' generation, where I own the building and loan. My name is on the sign. I'm in charge of this.
mhm,
It doesn't matter if Uncle Billy lost the money.
right,
If Uncle Billy lost the money, then in some way I lost the money because I was in charge of it.
right,
I should have taken care of it. So it's like it's not his problem; it's our problem.
right.
It's a very old way because he doesn't. Well, I mean, he does jostle him around, but he doesn't really blame him. He just, I mean, he gets like I say, he gets frustrated. He doesn't really blame him. It's like it's our problem, not just
Mhm.
yours.
Yeah.
You know. And what's interesting is he loses it so quickly,
hmm
and then doesn't ever put it together how he lost it. You
Yeah.
notice that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
He
you
just
lost it in a matter of about 8 seconds.
right.
I know I sound like I'm poking holes in this, but I do dearly love this movie. But it's just fascinating. It's like he's so forgetful. You know, he's got all the little
The
strings,
strings
tied
on
around.
his finger. Yeah.
And when he loses it, he loses the money in about 8 seconds.
hmm
And it's like he's not putting it together. It's like, okay, I put the money in the newspaper. I folded up the newspaper. I gave it to Mr. Potter.
Right, because he's so frantic and panicked. He's not.
Yeah.
He can't think. He's
not
not.
thinking.
He's not able to retrace his steps. He goes back and looks at the table. It's not on the table. He looks in the garbage can. It's not in the garbage can. And then he has no, like he had no idea that he had that conversation, that interaction with Potter.
And he's going home and looking in closets he hasn't been in since his wife died.
Right.
But if I lost $8,000 that was going to keep my business open, I'd panic too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I can't blame him.
I wouldn't be able to think.
No.
I'd be like, I'm trying to think, but it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But we're trying to apply logic to this, but I mean, you know, again, it's still a great film, and it is terribly emotional
It is very, and it's
without being manipulative.
right. Yeah, everything is earned.
Everything.
Every emotion is earned. Every laugh is earned, whether it was supposed to be in it or not.
Yeah.
Because I always love talking about that scene. They're having a holiday party, and Uncle Billy's drunk, and he's just point me in the direction of home, and gives him his hat and turns him. He's like, this way. Oh yeah, okay.
No,
And
he
he
says, "I'm going to go spit in Potter's eye."
right, and he
Point
goes,
me the right.
and you hear this big crash, and he goes, I'm all right. I'm okay. And you just see the camera holds on Jimmy Stewart, and he starts laughing. And it's because a rigger, a guy off camera, dropped something or like
He bumped into a table full of props.
right, and made this huge crash. And he was terrified. They thought that the thing was wrecked, and then he just ad-libbed, I'm all right, like he ran into a bunch of trash cans and saved the whole take.
Yeah,
And actually made it a lot better than what they would have used if that hadn't happened.
those miracle things.
Yeah,
It just happened.
it was. I want to say it was Robert Altman that said a director is just a presider over accidents, and it's just choosing which accidents you want to keep in the movie. And
Try telling
that's
that to
one of
Stanley Kubrick.
them. What? Okay, so
You know,
not
we were talking
everybody
about
had the
Shining,
same
we talked about
style.
how precise and how the precision that at which everything takes place. I can't even imagine. You know, just Kubrick did not preside over acting.
Well, the funny thing is, he did. It just he made it look like once if something happened that he liked, he would then make that the plan, and then he would control it. But it was, everything that happened for by accident was not seen on camera. Like he would then refine it into what he thought would work best.
Yeah. Well, let's talk for a second about this movie is so American.
Oh
Because
yeah.
it deals with the small town aspect. There was a time, and this is not quite as much anymore. There was a time when I was growing up. You knew everybody in the neighborhood. You knew the names of their dogs and cats. You knew aunts and uncles, grandpa. You knew the people in your neighborhood. This is one of those towns
Yeah.
where you know everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is it extends to the audience, because if you're an audience in 1946 going to see this movie, you know all of these actors.
Mm-hmm.
So you know Thomas Mitchell, you know Beulah Bondi, you
Right.
know all of these people, and so they're familiar to you.
Right.
So it's like going to visit old friends.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, when you watch this movie, they are like old friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you know them, you know who they are. You always know a little bit about them. I'm amazed that that Capra was able to juggle 24 characters, like 24, 25 characters in this movie, and you know who all of them are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's.
Yeah.
I mean, there's clearly George at the center of all of it. But you have all these supporting characters, like the mother, the brother, Uncle Billy, Bert and Ernie,
But they were played by actors that, if you were watching this in the 40s, you were familiar with from every other movie.
absolutely.
Because they always played this type of character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's populated by just old friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason I think it grabs hold of people. And also it's good-hearted message. This movie is uniquely American
Yes.
in that respect.
Yes.
Because it is, what's interesting to me is, this is my pick for our Christmas movie, our Christmas duology. Next week, you are choosing Christmas Story,
Yes.
which both take place in Indiana,
Yeah.
essentially.
Mhm.
Now, they could be small-town America anywhere, but they both take place in Indiana. I don't know why particularly Indiana. I don't know why particularly Indiana has to be the hub of Americana, but it's interesting to me.
It is. It is. It is. And if you've ever been to Indiana, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's just another place. It's not good. It's not bad. It's like
It's
when
the
I'm
idealized version. It's
right,
movies are
right.
all heightened
Well,
in
and
reality anyway.
that was the big thing with the production code back then. Anyway, is like everything was idealized. You didn't get to see the reality of any of these situations, the reality of language or sexualities or anything like that going on. It just wasn't permitted, so you didn't see it in the movies. And that's why when people watch these old movies, it's like, oh, things were simpler back then. It's like, no, just the representation was. Like,
Well, some of it is suggestive
mm-hmm.
because
Oh, well,
you
yeah,
can go
yeah.
to the nightmare version of nightmare version of Pottersville, and I mean their diamond dance and all of that, and
Mm-hmm.
Violet's being arrested, and the diamond dance
Likely
girl,
for prostitution and
likely for prostitution, and I mean it's there.
it's
It's
there.
not like this is something anybody doesn't know about.
Right, and but like in all the other movies and stuff, like you had to have a director that was willing to try to circumvent the production code, like Hitchcock, for that to, or Douglas Sirk.
Or you had to bury it.
Yes, but it was still there if you were looking. Like,
Yeah.
but
If you've ever seen the movie, if you've ever seen the documentary The Celluloid Closet, which is a history of gay cinema, they show you how they coded
mm-hmm.
coded certain types of characters
Right,
so that they could get around the production. You didn't actually say the words, but it was out there.
right,
The same thing goes for sexuality. The same thing goes for a lot of really violent acts.
mm-hmm.
You know, you can suggest it without showing it.
right,
And that's the way it was. Nowadays we show everything,
right.
but
For better or for worse.
for better or for worse, better and for worse.
Yes.
But I'm just always, I love this film to death. It's fascinating. It's amazing that they made it so well. And it was really the last good film that Capra ever made.
It really was. I mean, he made some entertaining baubles in the really in the 60s. In the 50s, he had a lot of trouble getting work in the 50s.
Do you think the time just passed him by? He had a very idealized version of the American man.
He was
I think
he
it
was
might have passed him by.
yeah, he was they called his movies Capricorn for good reason. I mean, he was in an older guard of left-wing flag waving that kind of fell by the wayside because people started to get disillusioned with a lot of things that the government was saying after the war, when the job market crashed again, and the realities of life after war started to come back into focus and everything. His uplifting patriotic messages just didn't quite work anymore. But then he started to do things. I think in the 50s he did The Little Foxes. In the 60s he did Hole in the Head with Frank Sinatra and Edward G. Robinson, which is a cute little picture. It's where you get the High Hopes song from '63, the ant and the rubber tree plant.
Yes.
He's got high hopes. That's where that comes from. Won
I
an
always
Oscar.
I always say that the good-hearted gusto American spirit of Capra gave way to Billy Wilder.
Yeah,
Billy Wilder
I'll go with that.
He was more suited to the times after World War II. You know, we were a little less idealized.
Right.
And also
his cynical.
And also that, yeah, cynicism. And also that extends to Jimmy Stewart's career, because before this, he was the guy with his hands in his pockets, the aw shucks, you know,
Right.
And after the war, you got into Wonderful Life, and you got Vertigo, you got Winchester 73.
Right. He started working with Anthony Mann and Alfred Hitchcock, and
Right.
the war really changed Jimmy Stewart
He did.
a lot.
And it did change Capra, too.
It changed Capra. It changed George Stevens, um, which is something that I would love to talk about. Pre and post war George Stevens, his lighthearted comedies, and then he comes back from the war and he makes like A Place in the Sun and Giant and uh, East of Eden and like
Well, if we talk about...
he didn't make East of Eden. That was Elia Kazan. Sorry.
My recommendation is going to be, for this episode, is going to be a documentary from Netflix called Five Came Back, which is about William Wyler and John Ford and George Stevens, who went overseas to film the war for propaganda, and it changed their lives.
Yeah.
And you see what they saw, you get their experience. It's an amazing, I think it was in 3 parts, 2 parts, maybe 3. We may make an episode out of that one day.
I'd like to see it. I haven't watched that yet.
It's fascinating. Because I just love filmmakers. But they just went over there to make propaganda, and it became something else.
Have you ever seen any of Frank Capra's propaganda pictures?
I have.
The Why We Fight series?
I saw one of those years and years ago when I was really getting into Frank Capra.
Right. I actually have a VHS box set of those.
Really?
Yeah, all 5 of them, and I've watched them. They're really informative, but they're very Frank Capra propaganda. It's like
very naive.
in a way, yes, but I mean it's what the government wanted to tell the people. So
yeah,
you know, it's very fascinating to see that, and then to juxtapose it with what John Huston put out, which was very much not propaganda.
Or even John Ford.
Yes.
If Capra had a very idealized version of an American small town, John Ford had an idealized version of the American West. And I use the word idealized with a capital I.
Yeah. Yes.
Because nowadays we're going back and we're looking at these films with a much more cynical edge, realizing how damaging that idealized version may have been, with its portrayals of particularly minorities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, It's a Wonderful Life doesn't do that, because there are very few minorities. You see in this film, there's one African American, and she's the Navy. And there's an Italian family. And that's it. Everybody else is white. And I guess, for 1946, it might have seemed more appropriate, or might have seemed more, how do I say this? It might have seemed more normal to your average white movie-going audience.
Right.
This was the version of America they were more comfortable with.
Right. And that's, I mean, how different is that today when people got up in arms over Finn in the new Star Wars trilogy being a black man, saying, "Oh, well, who are our kids going to look up to and identify with if the Star Wars main character is a black guy?" It's like every person in every other movie ever. Like,
yeah.
It's like
you jump ship. What do you want?
And it's like, people still don't understand that you can identify with people even if they don't share your skin tone or
right.
orientation or gender assignment, or it's like, look,
It's fascinating. In 21st century, people are still struggling with that.
I know, I don't get it. I don't get it. But I never will. Um, but you know, I would say for my recommendation, that would definitely be those Why We Fight, Frank Capra's Why We Fight um, pictures, and the few Jimmy Stewarts that we mentioned, Vertigo, uh, Rope, Rear Window, the Hitchcock movies that he made, that were so good that
If
he
you want to, if you want to follow the timeline of Jimmy Stewart, you start Jimmy Stewart 101 is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
right.
Then the Philadelphia Story.
Hmm.
Then this. Then Vertigo.
Hmm.
If you want to see his post-war career, you know, or any of his westerns
Hmm.
that
Well,
he made after this.
Winchester 73 is so good.
I love that movie to death. I like it better than How the West Was Won.
Well, How the West was won was
It
How
was
the
just
West
a
was
second.
won was a gimmick,
Yeah.
and it was way too long, and all they wanted to do a narrative in the Cinerama format, which I
That
mean on the
Cinerama, that Cinerama format has damaged the film
right.
because you can see where the themes are.
Right. Yes. I mean, they only made I mean, at least How the West Was Won was better than the other narrative picture that they made, which was the Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, which is not good at all.
I never saw that.
It's not good at all. Uh, uh, so I mean, at least How the West Was Won has some really good segments.
Yeah.
Um, but you get Winchester 73, and you get like he did like 3 or 4 with Anthony Mann.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to remember what was the one with that he was a bounty hunter.
I don't remember.
It was one of the Anthony Mann ones. Just any western with Jimmy Stewart directed by Anthony Mann was really really good. Um, so
The
yeah, I
Bounty
mean, huh?
The Naked Spur.
Yeah, the Naked Spur. That's the one I was thinking of. He
I had to
systematically
look
tries
it
to
up.
turn. He has to try to turn this gang against each other so that he can get the person out, so that he can collect the bounty. Because I think they killed his brother or his wife or his sister or something. Like,
It's really sad that I typed in to Google Jimmy Stewart as bounty hunter, and I got The Bounty Hunter from 2010 was the first thing that came up.
thank you,
Really?
Google.
Thank you, Google. You suck. But
But
honestly, I was telling people that we were going to do this episode,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to tell people we were going to do this episode because this is so familiar. This is one of those Christmas movies that people have to have,
yeah,
and it's the first thing you think of. I'm always one of those. I like to go a little bit off the beaten path. The first movie I was going to pick for this was Miracle on 34th Street, and then I watched the movie and I'm like, I don't have anything to talk about.
it's a pretty straightforward movie. I'm actually impressed you didn't pick Die Hard. Honestly,
Yeah, well,
there's always next year.
it's always next year. And we've already, yeah, so. And we're covering a really good movie next week. Next week, we're going to talk about A Christmas Story.
Yay!
Which is your favorite Christmas movie.
It really is. It really is. And you know, I'm looking forward to talking about that one because that movie is so much fun, and it just ends up whenever you talk about it, it's just recounting the scenes from the movie, and because it is a perfect movie, one of those rare perfect movies that it's not worth trying to poke holes in because it's so entertaining and so endearing and
How
just
is
so
it that
well
I can
put
poke
together.
holes in It's a Wonderful Life and I can't poke holes in Christmas Story?
Yeah, I don't know. You got me, but you can't. It's,
They can't.
it's like there's a handful of perfect movies, and uh, that's one of them.
By the way, I want to mention about It's a Wonderful Life. One more thing that I need to mention. Um, be careful buying the DVD
Ooh, yeah, they've got some weird run times.
because they have some weird run times. They also, it's confusing because sometimes the picture on the front will be in color,
Mm-hmm.
and you go home and watch the movie, and it is in color.
Yeah.
Make sure that if you get the DVD, you get the one where the box cover is in black and white.
And look on the back and make sure that it says B
And
and
look on the
W or
back and
black
make
and
sure it
white.
says black and white. Because there are some colorized versions floating around out there.
Right. A lot of times, in the caption on the back, when it's telling you about it, it'll say, "And presented in glorious black and white." Those are the ones you want to get. Because,
Sometimes they'll say it on the front.
yeah, just
Um,
as a
Sometimes those
distinction.
descriptions can be really, really vague.
That's true.
You just try figuring out that the year a movie was made by looking on the box cover. It's frustrating. All right,
But
that's all I got to say about
that
It's a
about
Wonderful Life. You gonna take us home?
yeah, that about does it for us here on the Pod Bay Doors. Thank you very much for listening. You can find Jerry's writings at armchaircinema.com, armchairoscars.com, and overthinkingoscars.com. And you can find him on Twitter at armchaircma. You can find my stuff at talkmovietome.com and me on Twitter at talkmovietome1. We thank you very much for tuning in and listening to us. Any suggestions or thoughts you might have on the episodes or on any movies that you would like to hear us do, leave them in the comments. We greatly appreciate any feedback you have for us. Give us your likes and everything, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. We thank you very much, and happy holidays. The Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.